This is Deborah Atkinson, and you're listening to Flipping 50, where I address your top questions and things you struggle with most so you can have more energy and less decision fatigue about what to eat, how to move, and you can change your thoughts to flip 50 with the life and the energy you love in this second half. And my guest today, I have a feeling is going to resonate with everyone. Certified Functional Nutrition and Lifestyle Practitioner, Board Certified Integrative Health Coach, and Certified Eating Psychology. You heard me right. Coach Mindy Gorman-Plutzer brings 24 years of nutritional counseling experience. She introduces a unique functional approach to simple and complex health issues relating to or resulting from disordered and addictive eating behaviors. She is the author of The Freedom Promise, 7 Steps to Stop Fearing What Food Will Do to You and Start Embracing What It Can Do for You. Love that title. In August, she'll launch Stop Fearing Food and Start Loving Your Body, an unconventional approach to say goodbye to your disordered eating for good. Mindy has appeared on numerous recognized syndicated podcasts, written for Mind Body Green, and is a regular contributor to the 50 Plus Life. She is speaking our language. Mindy, thanks so much for being here.
Oh, thank you, Deborah. Thank you for inviting me. I'm really happy to talk to your audience.
And out of total respect for you, we talked for a minute in the green room, and I failed to ask the prep question I so often do. Did I do you justice with your last name, or did I slaughter it? Do you want to say it correctly?
You did just fine. Mindy Gorman-Plutzer. Thank you.
Plutzer. All right, good. I love to get that right. Okay. So we're going to dive into some questions here, but as is so often true, often an expert became that or started to dive into it because of a personal story. And I know you've got a story. Tell us a little bit about your life experience that's woven into what you do, your practice, and how you help heal.
Yes, thank you. I am a huge believer in story. Who doesn't love a good story, right? Especially one with a happily ever after. So my story started out as one that was going to have a happily ever after. Had a wonderful upbringing in the 50s and 60s, was a child of the 70s, was married early in my life at 21, became a mom at 22. But through it all, through a series of, I would say, messaging, as so many of us got in those decades, my coping skills weren't really perfected, to say the least. And as a result, for the greater part of my life, my relationship to and behavior with food reflected my fear of what it would do to me. And that basically came from growing up in a home where beauty was revered. And in order to be viewed as beautiful, you needed to be thin, very thin. And my mother, God bless her soul, still kicking at 83, taught me to become a professional dieter. So for me, that morphed into learning how to restrict my food, which led to episodes of binge eating, which morphed into very frequent occasions of purging. I judged my self-worth and attractiveness by the size of my thighs, the size of my clothes, never satisfied with the number on the scale or the image in the mirror. And these behaviors, as well as the beliefs about how small I desired my body to be, stayed with me through the decades of my life during which I could have been experiencing the most wondrous growth and self-empowerment. I hit bottom when my disordered beliefs and behaviors morphed into a full-blown eating disorder. The consequences that ensued had a truly profound effect on my then teenage daughters, because I was well into my 30s and 40s at that time, my marriage, my health, so much so that some of those health challenges remain with me today. But what I realized was that I was totally detached and disconnected from my body. I was so stuck in thoughts and beliefs, the story, right? So stuck in that story. So I realized that I needed to step back and take a deep inventory, because I saw that, I went for help, but the meal plans, the weekly doctor weigh-ins, the therapy, the library of self-help books really did nothing to enforce lasting recovery, because I still was feeling so disempowered.
How did you end up going the road you did to turn that into, I whipped this, I got this?
Well, this is where, I'm sorry for interrupting you. This is where the story gets good. In my late 40s, my husband, love of my life, was diagnosed with metastatic melanoma. Oh. And it was a terminal prognosis. Needless to say, the coping skills that I referred to before were not there. I can't say that I'm proud of how I behaved, how I chose to cope. And he passed in 2004. 2005, I realized I needed to get myself together. I had 2 grown daughters that did not deserve to lose another parent. So I embarked on serious self-discovery, therapy, self-help, and I found out about the Institute for Integrative Nutrition. Now, me being like so many other people struggling with eating disorders, was a complete nutrition nerd. I knew everything about nutrition. In fact, right. I like to say that I knew how to diet, but I certainly didn't know how to eat. So that's another topic we can get to in a little while. So I enrolled in the Institute for Integrative Nutrition, became a board-certified health coach, and that led me to the Institute for the Psychology of Eating, which really solidified a lot for me, because through that training, I learned so much about my own psychology, what was making me tick, and I learned how to listen and really, really dive deep into who I was as an eater. That's what Mark David says all the time. And what that means is how you eat, why you eat, and when you eat really need to be addressed. It's even more important than what you eat, because when you look at the how, the why, and the when, the what has a funny way of taking care of itself, because you become empowered. You become empowered with choice, and you're no longer ruled by that willpower demon.
Love that.
Yeah. So after that, I was introduced to the concept and the philosophy of functional nutrition. And that fascinated me, because functional nutrition is based on the philosophy of functional medicine, which is nutrition and lifestyle, right? And it speaks to the systems of the body. And when we look at the systems of the body and how they're functioning, we forget about symptom management, in that, not that we forget about it, it's a misguided term, but we put our focus on root cause resolution. So through that training, I started to put it all together. And I started to think about what helped me emerge as a recovered woman. And I realized that it was when I started listening to the wisdom of my body, not what I was told I needed to eat in order to feel recovered, I started to feel incredibly empowered with choice. When I started to realize that certain foods made me feel better or worse because of the physiology that was happening within me as a result of, or perhaps leading up to, my disordered behaviors, my choices became different. I felt empowered. So that led me to create the program that I have today, which is indeed an unconventional approach to say goodbye to your disordered eating for good.
And I think that you really hit the nail on the head for an emotional trigger for a lot of women. I don't know I don't know too many women really in the United States, and I can't speak for the world. That would be abroad, and I think other countries have a little different orientation. But most women can identify with being a good dieter, knowing calorie counts forward and backward, about foods, knowing even nutritional content about foods, but still struggling with how do I do this to serve my body best. So love what you're doing. And thank you so much for, sharing your story.
Oh, you're very welcome. But I would need to speak to what you just said, because we're surrounded by a diet culture that is constantly telling us to eat this, don't eat that. And in many cases, there's science to back it up. What's a woman to do? What a woman is to do is to dig deep, find her deepest sense of self, and listen to the wisdom of her body. Find out what makes her feel best in her body. Get out of the thoughts, the beliefs, the messaging that doesn't serve us well. Leave the attachment to story behind. And that's key. That's the bottom line. So whether you are underfeeding yourself or overfeeding yourself, whether you are restricting in an effort to control or emotionally eating in an effort to check out, you're still exhibiting and experiencing disordered eating behaviors. And there is a difference between disordered eating and eating disorders. Okay, eating disorder is a clinically diagnosable condition. It's classified as a mental illness because it does affect how we think, how we feel. And I have some theories about that, chicken or egg kind of theories, because of what science is telling us now about the gut-brain connection. And we can talk about that in a minute. But what I think is really, really important for us to understand is that our attachment to story keeps us tied to the attachment to that belief system that doesn't serve anymore. And it's really, really, really important for us to step back and connect again to what is lost by so many when we are approaching midlife and we are triggered by so much in terms of loss, parents aging, deaths of parents, and of course the visibly aging body. Where does that take us?
So good. So let's dive into that just a little bit about, when you talk about eating disorders in midlife. I've read before, I know this to be true because I've worked with these women for 35 years. Even as a younger college student, I was working with older adults because I have a history of being raised by some and other research. But let's talk about disordered eating versus eating disorders, whichever we're talking about in midlife. Give me your take, because you probably see this way more than anybody else. Are we talking about those kinds of things that carry over, that were present earlier in life and now they've still got them, not dealt with them? Or are we seeing there's an emergence of problems that occur at midlife that weren't there before?
Yes and no. Yes and yes, right? Yes and no. It really depends on the individual, okay? Disordered eating, bottom line, is all about misinformation. Eat this, don't eat that, being totally disassociated from your body, being entrenched in the diet culture creates disordered eating. An eating disorder is when there are physical and psychological manifestations relating to one's behavior with food and her body. Does that make sense to you?
It did. So you couldn't say that there was more of one versus another. So both are present potentially, yes. But I mean, when you work with somebody, are you seeing more people present who've had issues for years and haven't dealt with it, or know it's there but just haven't been able to do anything about it, or people who find themselves in this space of suddenly having disordered eating?
I work with two kinds of clients. One, the woman who is struggling with resistant weight loss, who believes that she's been on every diet known to mankind and can't get unstuck. The woman who is good all day, comes home from work, maybe pours herself a glass of wine or two before she even takes her coat off and her shoes off, and sits down at the table, if she's alone or not, and just loses it in terms of her compulsive overeating. And she wonders why she can't get a handle on it. I would say that is more of a condition of disordered eating. Then I work with the people who have been medically diagnosed and treated for eating disorders, who have been in residential treatment and have not been given tools that are sustainable once they get out. That really speaks to the unconventional approach that I bring to my program. Because we need to look at the genetics. There's a tremendous genetic component to eating disorders. 60 to 85% are the numbers that I've read that that's how strong the genetic component can be. There is a 90 to 98% of people struggling with eating disorders have some sort of digestive distress. Now, that speaks to the microbiome. Was there a disruption to the microbiome, the messages that the gut is sending to the brain, that could have been a result from early childhood trauma that caused a dysregulation in hunger hormones, that causes an irregularity in brain chemistry? Or do the disruptive behaviors to the microbiome as a result of the binging, restricting, purging behaviors, is that causing a disruption to the microbiome, which is sending messages to the brain that's disrupting the brain chemistry? This we're still finding out. So when I work with a client, the first thing I look at is their behaviors, right? What can we clear? What clutter can we clear? What can be let go of in terms of inflammatory foods and behaviors, so that we can start with a clean slate? And that very well has to do with story.
Very good. So jumping in right there, when you do removal, meaning an elimination phase, as we practice here at Flipping 50, many of my listeners will be familiar with that if they've already done a program. Can that be risky, or a place where you want to tread lightly or carefully, at least, with the people you're working with, because it may then feel like a diet?
Right. We tread very carefully, and it's never, ever presented as an elimination diet. It's always a healing diet. It's a therapeutic protocol. It doesn't have to be forever. It's to understand what's going on. It's to help us understand what your body is doing with the food that you're eating. More importantly than what you're eating, what's your body doing with what you're eating? And that becomes very empowering, because for the first time, this struggling individual is being told that it's okay to listen to her body. It's okay to accept that what I'm eating is not making me feel good. And maybe it's not all in my head. I'll give you a perfect example. You go to a residential treatment program, or you're in an outpatient program, and your meals are served to you. Now, most often these are institutional kinds of food, right? Institutionalized prepared foods. So maybe you're served a bagel and cream cheese, or you're given a plate of lasagna, and you're told that. I'm sorry.
I'm crying over that.
So you're told that you must eat this, and if you don't eat this, then you're not stating that you're committed to your recovery. So you eat it in an effort to be compliant, because that's what we are. We're very good little girls. We eat it, and then we complain that we have digestive distress. What's going to happen usually is you're going to be given another session with a therapist, rather than looking at the fact that perhaps your digestion, which has been on vacation for a long time, or you're living in fight or flight and you're not digesting properly, needs to be addressed. That's when we look at how physiology is affecting psychology. Now, I need to put a caveat on that. It's also very important to understand that there is going to be fear and anxiety when we're asking our patients, clients, to engage in a meal that they might not be comfortable with. We can manage that, but we cannot not honor the physiology that is an underlying issue with eating disorders. And I feel so passionately about this because I was there. That's how I was told I needed to prove I was recovered. And it didn't work for me. When I was left to my own devices, I reverted back to the tricks and the tools that were keeping me very small. It wasn't until I became empowered that I could let go, that this eating disorder lifted like a cloud. And I stopped. One day I forgot to weigh myself. Another day I left the house without looking at the size of my thighs in my pants. Then I realized, hey, you know what? I forgot to ask for my salad dressing on the side, and I ate my salad anyway. It lifts like a cloud. And there is no sustainable recovery without empowerment. And the conventional message today is not empowering. It's dehumanizing, if you ask me. Demoralizing, to say the least.
So agree. Yeah. All right. So you may have hinted at many of these along the way, but let's nail these down for somebody who's conflicted and definitely knows she wants out of this cycle that she's in, but keeps getting sucked back in. I mean, what are some lifestyle skills? Because that is really what we're talking about. We're not talking about, take another program for 4 weeks or 8 or 12, take another diet, start that, or a New York Times bestseller and do that. But we're really talking about the skills to make it easy and automatic to do what you did, right? Walking out of the door without looking at your thighs, those kinds of things. What are the lifestyle skills we can adapt to support recovery?
Well, we know the importance of sleep, of course, and hydration and proper movement and resilience and relationships and community. But before we can truly delve into any of that, it's got to go back to story. We have to look at the story we're attached to, look at the story that has created expectations so that we can lovingly let go of what's no longer serving us. Our story will always remain our story, but sometimes we need to close the book on a certain chapter, put it on the shelf, and sometimes it takes really an effort to dig deep and ask the questions, become curious, become aware, and ask, how can I reframe so that I can rewrite what is going to become my happily ever after?
Very cool. So what's the key to letting go?
Honoring your past, looking at everything that happened to this point, understanding that it was the best you could do at the time. Eating disorders start out as a solution. They start out as a solution to what we fear we can't tolerate. While the behaviors are maladaptive, they start out as being adaptive. It's protection, it's numbing, it's checking out, it's control, it's punishment. It's one of many things, and that purpose can change over time on any given day. So it's looking at that, letting go of the shame, acceptance, compassion, and forgiveness allow for an authentic letting go. And then we can look at how we are reacting to those triggers, because there are always going to be triggers. And as we get older, the triggers become truly painful. We're dealing with loss. We're dealing with grief. We're dealing with disappointment. We might be dealing with betrayal. We're dealing with health issues, caregiving, and all of the issues that come that. And as I said before, not to mention a visibly aging body that doesn't always feel so good. So then we look at the skills, right? How well am I sleeping? Am I not sleeping well? Why aren't I sleeping well? Well, there are hormonal issues that might need to be addressed. There are nutritional issues that might need to be addressed with respect to blood sugar. Any one of several things could be contributing to poor sleep. Then, of course, there is, as I mentioned, stress and resilience. How are we going to manage those triggers? And when I say manage, I mean understanding that they're going to be there. They're never going to go away. And nor do I believe that an eating disorder ever goes away, but it can be managed. We don't need to beat it over the head. We need to develop a healthy voice. Strengthen the healthy voice so it drowns out the voice of the eating disorder. And then, of course, nutrition. And again, I believe strongly in a healthy nutritional protocol. I do not prescribe to an all foods fit philosophy. I think an all foods fit philosophy is only feeding our anxiety. And then there is movement. We have to look at how we're moving our bodies. Are we moving in an effort to honor our bodies? Or are we moving in an effort to punish them because we ate something we fear we shouldn't have? Or are we moving in an effort to punish them, in an effort to make them go away? And finally, our relationships and our community. Make sure we surround ourselves with what truly nourishes us, because what truly nourishes us is not going to be found in the kitchen.
Say a little bit more about that. How did you find what truly nourished you?
I came home to myself. I realized that what I needed most was deep within me all the time. People talk about a higher self, a higher power. For me, that means something outside of myself, something bigger than me. I spent so much of my life and so much of my adult life outside of myself, looking for something else, looking for that brass ring, depending on other people to do what I feared I couldn't take care of myself. That I never allowed myself to find that sacred space of solitude within me. Once I quieted the noise and I started to listen, and I started to understand what being present meant and what it means to be mindful, I tapped into that sacred space of solitude, which became my deepest self, which is for me, my higher power. It's buried deep within me. And I stay connected there as often as I can. And believe me, there are days I lose it. There are days that I'm not there as often as I should be. But what helps me is that I know I can always come back to it.
Love that. Nice. So you said that you realized, right, something. So how did you get to that point? What steps, what actions were you taking to start that realization? Since that's not a verb that we can tell everybody, you need to realize.
No.
How do you get there?
But, that speaks to how I feel about change. Because what I'm talking about, Deborah, I believe really is intangible. It's something that's universal. It's a life force that I'm speaking to. So when I talk to people about change, I explain that I believe that change is something we do. To fully embrace change, to be the change, we need to transform. Transformation is about letting go. Transformation is about emerging. Transformation comes from within. And I know that for me, it was very gradual. For me, it came when I started to trust myself with food, when I allowed myself to eat what I knew was good for me. and loosened up a lot of the rules. And I saw that this was okay and that was okay. And I started to embrace, as I used the tagline for my book, embrace what food could do for me instead of fearing what it would do to me.
Nice. Can you give an example? So I imagine you relaxing, about what foods you're going to eat and what you do and realize this is going to be okay. What was the first step? Would that include, taking a taboo food that you hadn't let yourself have and having a bit of it?
I'm thrilled you asked that, because I have a fabulous example of this in my book and in the course that's going to be launched next month. I had found a recipe for a vegetarian chili that looked phenomenal to me. And chili, to me, was something that would have been a forbidden food. I viewed beans as being high calorie, high carb, not high on my list. But something about this recipe was calling me. So I had the recipe on my kitchen counter, and it was a wintry day, and I decided I was going to go to Whole Foods. I was going to buy all the ingredients. I come home, and I started to prepare this chili. And I put everything in the pot, and I'm stirring, and I'm tasting, and I'm stirring, and I'm tasting. And it was so good. I felt my soul just warming up. In fact, I even added another can of beans because I wanted it to be thicker. And I added kale, and I added butternut squash. And I'm adjusting the seasonings. And it dawned on me that not once during my stirring and my tasting was I thinking about what this food was going to do to me. It was just soul warming and delicious and fantastic. I couldn't wait to serve it. And I served it that night with some additional cheese and avocado and sour cream. And it was just an amazing experience for me. So amazing that I adapted the recipe and I renamed it Who Would Have Thunk It Chili.
Great story.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
I still make it and I still love it. And the recipe is included in my book, and it'll be included in the downloadable handouts in the course. And it's just a wonderful example of bringing mindfulness into the kitchen and mindfulness to the table. And if we could just bring that mindfulness to the table of life and feast on the abundance that is within us, it just, life is just wonderful. Appetite is life. And so many of us who know how to diet but don't know how to eat have denied our hunger for so long, and realize that by denying our hunger, we're denying our appetite. And then we're denying our lives.
Love that. I'm just kind of letting that we know how to diet, but we don't know how to eat statement linger, because I'm sure that resonates with everyone. All right. The last question I want to ask you before we wrap up, and I let everybody know how they can find you and the book and the program, is there a question we missed? Is there something I should have asked you that I didn't?
Well, I just would love to just run through my signature program, because it's an acronym for freedom, and it's the basis of everything we spoke about today, and it's truly the ultimate goal. So the acronym for freedom is this: find your enough, face your feelings, feel the love. Rest and digest. Eat when you're hungry, stop when you've had enough. Eat mindfully. Do something every day to make your body feel alive. And make sure that you surround yourself with what truly nourishes.
Great advice for anybody.
Yeah. You can apply it to every stage of your life and every issue that might have you stuck. Just be present and find your enough, because it's there. Listen, you'll hear it.
Very good. Thank you so much for coming to chat about this really important topic. It's a big part of Do we have enough energy, and are we putting that energy in the right place, or is something that's weighting us down, like disordered eating or thinking thoughts all day about food, preventing you from living the life you love? Mindy, where can listeners find more Mindy?
They can go to my website, thefreedompromise.com. And if they sign up for my newsletters, which I promise I will not bombard you with email, they will get the announcement of when my course launches, which will be August 28th with a free masterclass where I tell my story and touch upon a few of the steps we discussed today. And then they'll have the opportunity to take a deep dive with me in an 8-week online program. So sign up so that you can get notified for when the course launches. It's going to be amazing.
Fantastic. And listeners, I know you all have great comments, great questions and suggestions. And if you'd like to submit yours, leave it below the show link at flipping50.com/freedom. And join us on the Flipping 50 TV Facebook page to get all the juicy resources, the link to connect with Mindy and the show notes, and get the specific title of the book. And I'll highlight some of the juicy quotes that she gave me today. You can go again to flipping50.com/freedom. And if you enjoyed this show and it was valuable, please leave a rating in iTunes. It really helps us spread the word about how to flip 50 in the way we want to. And then share this with a friend to surround yourself with a supportive community of women on the same journey. What are you waiting for? Start flipping 50 today.